Hello. Miss Dimple, would you like to check your audio?
Good morning, Wendy.
Good morning. Hey, Dana.
Hi, Wendy.
Hi, Miss Johnson. Would you like to check your audio?
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all had a wonderful Easter weekend with your family. We have a packed agenda today, so let's go ahead and get started with an introduction. I'm Dimple Ajmera, serving you as the chair of the Environment, Equity, and Engagement Committee. Vice Chair, do you want to get started?
Good morning. My name's Renee Perkins Johnson, and represent District 4.
Happy Tax Day. Braxton Winston, at-large member and committee member.
Staff in the room.
Good morning, Sarah Hazel, Chief Sustainability and Resiliency Officer.
Good morning, John Thigpen, Climate Advisor through the American Cities Climate Challenge.
Good morning, Federico Rios with the Office of Equity, Mobility, and Immigrant Integration in our Housing and Neighborhood Services Department.
Good morning. This is Willie Ratchford with the Community Relations Committee. And in deference to what Councilman Winston said, it may be tax day, but it ain't happy.
Good morning, Rebecca.
These roads and infrastructure and stuff. Willie, come on now.
Yeah.
Good morning, Rebecca Hefner, Housing and Neighborhood Services.
Good morning, Dana Fett with the City Manager's Office.
Good morning, Donata Jackson, Office of Constituent Services.
Thank you, everyone. So let's get started. We have one item today on our agenda that is focused on how we continue to advance our Strategic Energy Action Plan goals through collaboration and through engagement with the North Carolina's Utilities Commission. And then we have two items that are focused on equity. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Ms. Hazel on the CF goals advancement.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. All right, so today what I'm going to speak with you about is a series of opportunities that city staff are taking to participate with the North Carolina Utilities Commission to advance your strategic energy action plan. I'm going to talk through a little bit about why we're taking this approach, and I'm also joined by John Thigpen, who is our climate advisor, who has done a lot of amazing work on this effort. I also have Dana Fenton, who I've been coordinating with as well. So we have an all-star team here. So first, just a level set, I'll just share that the North Carolina Utilities Commission is an agency of the state of North Carolina created by the General Assembly, and it regulates all investor-owned public utilities in North Carolina. And so for our purposes, we're really talking about energy and our strategic energy action plan. So last year, the city formally participated in a couple North Carolina Utilities Commission proceedings for the first time. And so what we want to do today is talk about how we're going to approach doing the same over the coming year and really get your feedback on this approach, because we see that there are a series of upcoming opportunities that could serve the city of Charlotte well as we continue to advocate and work to advance carbon reduction. So I think this slide is helpful in that I think it's important to note that there are a number of ways and avenues that we can partner and engage to advance positive energy outcomes. And so one of those is with direct engagement with Duke Energy, as well as being involved in their stakeholder processes. And we do that. We've come to you a couple meetings ago to talk a little bit about our partnership with eTrans Energy, which is a subsidiary of Duke Energy. So we work with Duke Energy both on the regulated and the unregulated side of things, and we see that as really, really important. But what we want to talk about today is that regulatory side with the North Carolina Utilities Commission, and in particular, formal participation, which means entering comments into the record of the North Carolina Utilities Commission proceedings that really lift up the voice of the city of Charlotte. And so because very recently there was bipartisan energy legislation that was signed into law by Governor Cooper in the fall, there are a series of opportunities that are coming up that are really going to help determine how the state gets to 70% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050. And so what we're looking to do is to really strategically engage in those types of proceedings, as well as some of the regular proceedings that recur on an ongoing basis, things related to how energy is generated and different types of programs, energy efficiency and renewable energy programs. And so because these things do come up quickly, we are excited to share with you today how we're approaching it so that we can be ready when they do. And so this is just a reminder of some of the items that we've talked about over the past couple meetings, but when we're looking at how we as an actual energy customer, as a municipality, advance our goals, one of the ways that we do that is simply by seeing a cleaner energy mix from Duke Energy. And so through working with the Utilities Commission, we can continue to advance those outcomes. And then this nice pie chart is probably also familiar, but as we're looking to close that red slice, that zero carbon gap, when we work to see better energy outcomes and to see a cleaner grid, what that means is that purple slice, that is Duke Energy's planned decarbonization by 2030, that slice could grow to be even bigger, thereby sort of making the red slice that we need to close smaller. Also, as we're looking at the types of opportunities that we have, like our Green Source Advantage program, where we're building the large-scale off-site solar project, which is that, again, that green slice could become larger when more programs like that become available and we participate in them. And so this is the way that this type of work directly can influence our gap. But it's not just us as a utilities customer, because, obviously we have our 2030 goals. It's also about our 2050 goals in the community and what community priorities are. So if we continue to share our goal to support low-income, energy-burdened households and thereby reducing the energy usage in the community, that also gets us towards those 2050 goals of becoming a low-carbon city. And so through engaging, we're looking for those types of opportunities as well, and looking to spur additional collaboration with other stakeholders like local governments, who are not only representing sort of themselves as an energy customer, but also their communities as communities who have these values around climate action, clean air, equity, et cetera. And so across the country, for cities that are taking climate action very seriously, like us, we have seen an uptick in participation with these types of regulatory bodies. So here's just some examples, many of which are our climate challenge partner cities. And in North Carolina, Asheville and Buncombe County as well has participated in a formal way. Durham has in a previous year as well. So if you look directly at our Strategic Energy Action Plan and your adopted policy, it notes in several places that there are just a lot of opportunities to work with the Utilities Commission to really signal that there are some opportunities to lower the carbon intensity of electricity production. So when we participate in these proceedings and we file comments into the record, what will our comments include? So if we look back at what we've done over the past year, you look at these green boxes, these are the types of items that we have focused on. So how do we see more zero carbon energy, earlier coal retirement? We've advocated for more opportunities for local government to participate in renewable energy. We've talked about increased programs for electric vehicles, supporting the electrification of our vehicles as an organization and as a community, increased energy efficiency. I will highlight for this committee one of the main focuses of our intervention, our formal participation last year in the IRP proceeding, the Integrated Resource Plan proceeding at the NCUC, was reduction of energy burden. And so this is just a snippet of one of our comments and some of the data that we provided along with it. But what we did was encourage Duke Energy to expand access to energy efficiency programs for low-income customers. And when you see that graph and info to the right, what you're really seeing is a depiction of how energy burden, so folks who are paying a disproportionate amount of their energy bill relative to their income on energy, 6.6%, you're seeing that overlaid with race. So this is, again, a racial equity issue, and this is an opportunity for us to really highlight that, to highlight our community, and to share that we do want to partner to determine how we can figure out some ways to address that. So I'll stop here, and now I'm going to hand it over to John Thigpen, who's going to talk a little bit about a couple of these proceedings, and then I'm going to wrap it up by talking about our approach, and then we can take any questions. So, John?
Okay. So building on what Sarah had shared previously, there are typically two broad buckets of proceedings at the Utilities Commission that are important for us to pay attention to. The first bucket I tend to refer to as the Big Bang bucket. And so the proceedings that at the commission that fill this bucket are typically triggered by a big one-off event. So the passage of House Bill 951 recently is one example of such a big event. And as Sarah mentioned, that law requires major reductions in carbon emissions in both the short and the long term. So the details of how those policy goals are achieved are worked out at the Utilities Commission, and their decisions are informed in part by stakeholder input. So this slide here shows some examples of proceedings that are going before the Utilities Commission in the near future due to the passage of House Bill 951. And of those, the most influential is what's referred to as the Carbon Plan, which is the one highlighted at the top. And that will serve as the roadmap for achieving both the short and long-term carbon reduction goals. So some of the decisions made in the design of that carbon plan will shape things like the speed with which fossil fuel plants are retired, the access to energy efficiency and renewable energy programs that Charlotte residents and businesses have, and the types of new generation used to replace retiring coal plants. So by being a formal participant in those proceedings, the city can ensure that its priorities and needs are considered by the Utilities Commission in their decision-making. And those voices of local governments particularly have largely been absent from Utility Commission proceedings historically. If we could move to the next slide. The second bucket is one that we can refer to as the steady state bucket. And so these are recurring proceedings that the Commission revisits every couple of years. And so although these proceedings may lack the excitement of some of those in bucket one, the decisions made in these proceedings will impact the city and its residents. And so it's important that the city continues to show up for those proceedings as well. This slide here shows some examples of those recurring proceedings that go before the Utilities Commission on a somewhat regular basis. Rate cases are the ones highlighted here, and so they tend to arise when the utility claims that their current rates are no longer sufficient to recover the total costs they experience for serving their customers. So by being a formal participant in rate cases, for example, the city can ensure that the Utilities Commission understands how those rate hikes would disproportionately harm low-income residents, or how those rate hikes could potentially increase the number of residents experiencing high energy burden. So, kind of one final thought to sum all this up is that, although it's great that the city has ambitious CAP goals, the reality is Charlotte resides in a state where electricity and gas markets are regulated. And because of that, the city isn't really in total control of its own CAP destiny. And so for that reason, it's important that engaging with the Utilities Commission continues to be a foundational part of the city's CAP strategy. I'll stop there.
All right, and so here is the way that we're going about crafting our messages. So we're going to be consistent with your Strategic Energy Action Plan policy and consider equity in the framing of our comments. We will, wherever possible, reference published research, data from subject matter experts, or just demonstrated data that helps to tell the story of what our goals are as a city and what our realities are as well. When we participate, we will be working across the organization where it makes sense. Obviously, we are working with Dana, who's on this call, and we are committed to briefing council on outcomes during regular reporting intervals. And of course, if there's something that comes up that is of a particular interest, bringing that forward to you in addition at that appropriate time. We also will be leaning on potentially new technical experts or some of our existing kind of array of technical experts to help us decode some of the complex regulatory documents that we work with. And I would be remiss if I didn't also say that one really important partner in this is obviously our city attorney's office. So I don't know if Karen Weatherly is on the call, but she has been absolutely amazing in helping us with the filings and helping us understand how some of these regulatory proceedings work. And then we will continue to collaborate with other local governments where possible so we can amplify our voices. And so in North Carolina, some of that has already been occurring, and we'll continue to do that. And so I think if you can go to the next slide. I guess in sum, we see that there is a real opportunity to continue to make the City of Charlotte's voice heard and lifted up in these proceedings. We see a lot of opportunities, and we are excited to continue down this path, but we are also very open to hearing your feedback and what you think of this approach. And so we'll pause here and see if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hazel. This is certainly a bold step, and many stakeholders have advocated for this for a long time. So this is the first time that we have looked into submitting a formal comment, which is great because we must recognize that there is a dependency on Utilities Commission and their action for us to meet our aggressive goals of 2030 and 2050 community-wide goals. So I'm really excited about this. I would be interested to hear from Mr. Fenton on implications, any implications that we should be considering with this approach on other items that we are pursuing at the state level.
Thank you, Ms. Ajmera, for that question. This is something that Sarah and I have had quite a few discussions about since the first time that the city submitted comments. I believe that was last year to the Utilities Commission. And because we're working closely together on this, I'm always trying to be cognizant of any areas that may conflict with any legislative objectives or even what's going on at the General Assembly with utility matters. I don't see any right now. I think the approach that she has outlined is a very good approach to take. But I'll continue working with her just in case something does arise. So I hope that answers your question.
It sure does. I appreciate that. And I would also be interested in seeing the language. I know that that is going to be work in progress, but I'd like to see before the final adoption of this by full council, once we at least give you all a green flag that yes, we would like to move forward with this approach. Does that mean the language will come to the committee and full council before we decide to take an action on this?
That's a great question, Councilman Ajmera. So our intent was to give you a high-level look at what some of our comments might include. But because some of the dockets aren't even out yet, we don't know exactly what the language will be because we have not crafted it. And so our thought was that to get your sort of nod that this is a good approach, and then we could share with you, depending on what the docket is, beforehand, what it is that we intend to put into comments. What we have done in the past with the 2 times that we participated is we've really just referenced a lot of City of Charlotte adopted policy to make sure that we're staying within the bounds of what City Council approves, so that we don't need to sort of come back to you and ask you to sign off on every time that we submit a comment. So I guess that is an open question, but we have not done that in the past.
I understand. So, the approach is great. I don't have any questions in terms of the approach. I fully support it because this is important for us to meet our CAP and equity goals. So, committee members, any questions? Mr. Winston.
Thank you. Can you pull up slide 4, please? I think I've been thinking about this a lot in different kind of conversations we've been having, and I'm glad that we are looking to kind of this approach. I think it's important. I think we should definitely leverage and increase our voice in the Utilities Commission process. I would like for us to kind of formally leverage our conversations around plans around transit into these Utilities Commission discussions. The questions that we're trying to answer around our future transportation plans, it's not if we will build out more electrical, rail, and bus infrastructure, but the questions are really about how and when. But when we do expand our network, there will be significant increases in rates paid to Duke Energy. So, and then when you add the prospect of future high-speed rail through our state and future transit and rail projects and electrical bus projects in different municipalities around the state, Duke Energy and when you align those time periods that this transition is happening, the time periods of our CAP, the state goals that are made, the build out of our transit system and other transit systems, then I think we really need to be having conversations with Duke Energy and engage them on the impact of these plans and these investments on the grid mix and grid output. If we are going to, if, for instance, if we build a 26-mile light rail, that's going to be a significant, we're going to pay a lot of money to Duke Energy to make that light rail go. We need to make sure that that energy is being produced cleanly, and we're not just burning, for instance, more coal to deal with that potentially disruptive impact on the grid. And then also remember, I know we're kind of streaming this towards CEAP, but the idea of having a fleet, regardless of if it's buses or trains, is that the use of that fleet will replace personal vehicle trips into and around our jurisdiction. So the ability to generate that energy to our fleet, I think is really important, and I see how all those things interconnect. So, how do we kind of leverage that conversation into the Utilities Commission conversations and all those things happening now?
So, Councilmember Winston, these are great comments. I think this is part of what I was hoping to get from you all today, which is, are there things that maybe we didn't share in this presentation that you would like us to consider as we're looking at some of what we will want to comment on and what some of the themes are in the future? So I'm just taking note of that so that as we go forward, we can look at that. And then I guess the second thing I'll say is on that slide that sort of has the different pathways to engagement, I think your comments are also well noted in that as we work directly with Duke Energy, they are our hometown utility company, we could be having, and we are, and we need to really consider how we can even strengthen some of those direct conversations in addition to taking your comments and looking at the formal way to enter those into the record for the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think, and I think there's even a nuanced kind of direction there for our own Charlotte-centric kind of priorities, and I think that's the build out of our transit system. Would the incredible 12, 15, however many $billion of investment into building our transit system, our future transit system, how can that potentially impact the overall kind of adoption of a cleaner grid? Can that kind of accelerate or help that mix? And if so, how do we strengthen that partnership with Duke Energy to actually figure out how to get that transit system built out? Because I feel like if those things can have mutual benefit, then we potentially find a stronger partner in getting those future goals. And I don't think we're having that conversation right now. At least those conversations are not being brought up to us on the council level, and therefore people in the community aren't hearing that. Because to me, it sounds like Duke Energy should it should be a great effort, to add something like the TMN to the mix, because that'd be an incredible effort and investment in cleaning the state grid. But if that's not true, I'd like to know that as well.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I understand the presentation correctly, and thank you for the presentation and the work that the city staff is doing. So it sounds like we are looking to make a formal comment to be presented to the Utilities Commission, because actually impacting the cost is outside of city council jurisdiction. I wonder if Duke or the city even is working with the low-income housing partners in the community. We will, make a statement regarding the increase in the rate, but is there anything that we can do on the back end to help residents lower their costs, such as working with Enlivian or Dream Key or Crisis or other organizations to get the information out to residents on how to lower their energy usage? Or is Duke working with those organizations, such as some of the senior high rises? Maybe there's something that Duke Energy can help in those buildings, that insulation or light bulbs or something to help residents to lower their usage, since the ability to lower the cost is outside of what we can do directly. So I just wonder, is any if from the city staff, maybe community relations or Duke Energy, if we have a partnership or collaboration with the low-income housing providers, if that would be an angle that we can impact directly. Thank you. I guess it's a question, and if we know if Duke is working with those providers, or if we in the city can work with those providers, just to let the residents know, because the costs are going up. They're 6.6% of their income. This may happen. So what can you do as a consumer to help lower your costs? Is there any engagement or any intentionality in working with the consumers? Thank you.
So Vice Chair Johnson, I can say, I can get back to you with some follow-up information about that, but I think that's a really important point. And Duke Energy has had neighborhood energy saver programs working in neighborhoods that are targeted around the state and in Charlotte, where they're doing some of that work. But I can get you a little bit more information about some of those relationships, and then look into what other opportunities exist. And I will say that those are the types of conversations that we are certainly having right now to figure out if there's some leverage points where the work that the city and other partners are doing around just supporting rehab projects can be overlaid with some of this energy saving work. So I think that's a great point, and be happy to get you some follow-up information.
Right, yeah, thank you. If the just working to make the buildings or the structures more energy efficient is going to have an impact on the residents. So thank you.
Yes, Ms. Johnson raises an important point about addressing utilities burden, cost burden. And I know we have in the past partnered with various nonprofits, Ms. Hazel, where we had installed solar panels, nonprofits in partnership with nonprofits to address some of this high energy cost. So I think it would be important if you could provide a follow-up report on all the programs that are out there that addresses the concern raised by Ms. Johnson.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Ashmere, so you've given me even more information. So if there's a way that the city can help some of these complexes with solar panels or something like that, what can we do as a city to control what we can? So I think if we've done that in the past, those are some ideas, again, that help the housing provider help the consumer.
Yes, absolutely, Ms. Johnson. I remember visiting Camp North End, neighborhoods near Camp North End, where Senator Deandra Salvador's nonprofit was doing a partnership with the city in rolling out solar panels in in communities of color. And I know that they were measuring by what percentage the utilities bills would be reduced. And I thought that was a great partnership. But I'm sure there are other partnerships that we have done. I just don't remember top of my head all the partnerships and programs that are out there. So I guess in the follow-up report, we could look into some of those solar panel installation programs that nonprofit partners offer in collaboration with the city, and also some utilities relief program that are out there directly by Duke Energy. So, Ms. Hazel, are we ready to move on to the next item on our agenda that is focused on equity? Because now that we are talking about equity, I think it's perfect timing for us to dive into our next two items. The first is the welcoming city that addresses the equity. And we will be one of very few cities in the nation to have equity welcoming city certification. Ms. Hazel?
Yeah, so while we pull up the other slide deck, I'm just going to hand it over to Federico Rios to kick us off, and then Emily Yaffe will take it from there.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and Committee Member Winston. We are incredibly excited to afford you all with an update related to an opportunity presented to us through our partnership with Welcoming America. Welcoming America is a national organization that works specifically with municipalities and nonprofit organizations around the country to assist in embedding welcoming processes in those organizations. And so we, as Councilmember Ajmira has shared, are at the precipice of potentially being a certified welcoming city, which has been an extensive process. And I'm excited to have Emily Yaffe to walk us through that. Emily serves as the Immigrant Integration Specialist in the Office of Equity, Mobility, and Immigrant Integration. Emily?
Thank you. Good morning. Really pleased to talk with you all about the welcoming certification and the work that went into this process throughout all city departments and across our partner organizations. Next slide. The welcoming certification measures cities on their ability to meet the welcoming standards. And the standards review our internal policy, practices, procedures, and the partnerships that we have with community-based organizations to be a city that is inclusive, welcoming, where all of our residents can thrive. Achieving this certification is a reflection on us as an organization, as a city organization. It is also a reflection on Charlotte as a community. Next slide. We're measured on the 7 core criteria: government leadership, which are systems and programs that strengthen our efforts and embed inclusion in government agencies; equitable access, which is community services and opportunities that are available to all residents, including immigrants; civic engagement, which includes newcomers being able to fully participate in civic life by increasing access to leadership and democratic spaces; connected communities. Newcomers and long-term residents are strengthened by sharing relationships and communicating shared values; education. Students have the support they need to succeed in school and an education they need to succeed in the workforce; economic development. Immigrants have the skills and assets to thrive, and economic development systems are prepared to leverage new and existing talent. And then finally, safe communities. Communities that foster trust and build relationships between residents, including newcomers, local law enforcement, and safety agencies. So it's a really all-encompassing review about the policies and practices and the work of our partner organizations in Charlotte. Some audit highlights. So to review the process, we submitted a self-assessment in 2020 or 2021. And then there was an audit process that was conducted where city employees across departments and local organizations were interviewed by Welcoming America, asked questions by things that were established in the self-assessment, which was also a partner effort, to see how they viewed the city as being a welcoming city, how they viewed the environment here. And some of the highlights that came up in that was government leadership. There's a strong feeling that the Office of Equity, Mobility, and Immigrant Integration was a key point of contact and readily available to our residents and able to help them connect with the services that they needed. For civic engagement, programs like the safety grants were recognized as providing opportunities for immigrant and ethnic community-based organizations to scale up and improve their service delivery. And then high recognition in connected communities. Partnerships with Spanish language media has fostered new and innovative means of information sharing. And then also our long and continuing work with Welcoming Week, which is the second to last week of September, where the City of Charlotte actively partners with community organizations to create moments of welcoming and a sense of belonging. Additional audit highlights.
Can you guys hear me?
Miss Yaffe, we cannot hear you.
Bring the microphone closer.
Is that better?
Oh,
Okay.
we missed a few seconds there in between.
Okay, should I go back to?
The last slide,
Okay.
yes.
In 2019, the Immigrant Community Committee was recognized as a great moment and good work for the certification, where the council committee at that time went across to the city to do community speaking moments to develop policy around how to be a more welcoming community, more inclusive, and address some of the challenges that are being faced by our immigrant community members. You'll remember that these meetings were also conducted, some in Spanish, with simultaneous interpretation provided in English, as well as some English meetings with interpretation into Spanish. Some of the results from those meetings of the Immigrant Community Committee was a compact on immigration, which was voted in by council in November in 2019. This compact continues to shape the federal legislative agenda. That's the document on the right. And then the document on the left was the language access policy that was signed into that was signed by the city manager in November of 2021. Council members heard a lot from the community about the need for improved communications, and there was a lot of support in having this policy signed. Next. We have a long-standing partnership with some of our media partners, including Norson Media, and these are two examples of that partnership. On the left is one of our monthly articles that goes to Norson Media about city projects that are going on. So this was the Playbook project for Albemarle Road. And then on the right is one of our employees, one of our Spanish-speaking employees recognized for Hispanic Heritage Month. We did a series with Norson Media recognizing a lot of employees in Charlotte. We received high marks in the blue starred areas, so government leadership, civic engagement, connected communities, education, and economic development. And this means that we met and exceeded requirements of the welcoming standard in each of these categories. And then there's equitable access and safe communities were recognized as areas for growth. And there's specific sub-pieces in this category that we've been asked to do additional work in the city of Charlotte. Next slide. For equitable access, it was recognized that there's a need for increased language access within our safety and emergency alert services, and programs and training for staff. So when we think about the language access policy being signed, these are areas of work where we've already made large strides forward with training for all staff and language access services, and then working with emergency management to increase our are translated materials as they go out. You may remember that during the winter storms earlier this year, a lot of that information was translated into 5 languages. And then as a common practice, there was a Spanish speaker there present for a press conference during the first storm. Another area for growth was safe communities. We were recognized as having high marks in training public safety staff on working with diverse communities, diverse populations. But we were asked to increase that training for code enforcement staff. We are working very closely with code enforcement to put a training in place, and they're looking forward to it. Last slide. So working with code enforcement and emergency management in these identified areas of growth. We're working with emergency management to build out a more accessible safety communications. With code enforcement, we've identified a training opportunity that will add a cultural competency component. And then the language access program is in process of being implemented across all city departments. And it includes regular trainings.
And I'll jump in here. Again, we are incredibly excited and fortunate to be sharing the information that Emily has presented to you all. We anticipate receiving our certified welcoming status next month during the 2022 Welcoming Interactive. You all will remember that we were actually scheduled to host the 2020 Interactive, but due to COVID, we had gotten postponed. And so we'll be hosting this year's Interactive May 18th through the 20th at the Westin Hotel here in Charlotte. We'd love it if specifically this committee, but all members of council would be present as plausible, given your schedules for that Interactive. Again, I can't verify that we'll be a certified welcoming city, but I have a very strong inclination that will occur in that moment. And again, it's a testament to the hard work that Emily has put forward, that our office has undertaken, and that all the community partners and organizations that we work closely with have spearheaded along with you all as members of council. We are incredibly grateful for this opportunity to get here, and we know that you guys have brought us to this point. And so excited to share this opportunity and look forward to hopefully seeing you at that event.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rios, and thank you so much, Ms. Yappi, for your work on this. And as Mr. Rios said, this is testament to the work that staff is doing along with our nonprofit organizations and community-based organizations. Mr. Winston and I were part of the council when council adopted the Charlotte Compass on immigration. And that was a lot of work that a committee had put in with so many community-based organizations. So it's great to see this has come a long way, and hopefully we will be one of the certified welcoming cities that welcomes everyone to our city. Also, I want to recognize the Navigator program, and I hear that from many, many immigrant-owned businesses that participated as part of our COVID relief to help some of this immigrant and refugee-owned businesses that participated in Navigator program to survive some very difficult times for our small business owners. And that certainly has kept many businesses currently in business. So I also want to thank staff for implementing that program and helping them navigate through some of the language barriers, cultural barriers, and helping them get the relief that they needed. So with that, committee members, any questions? Mr. Winston.
Thank you. Now, to that end, Ms. Ejmira, I am also a co-chair of Intergovernmental Relations, and that document and how we have included it in our legislative agenda have been really great as we've gone up to Washington and had conversations with our senators and congresspeople, both Republican and Democrat, there's definitely common ground in our approach. And I think it's strengthening those relations and allowing us to align things that we're trying to do or things that are happening on the federal level. So, we continue to kind of push forward. I have two questions. I guess they both relate to equitable access and community safety. When you say we're looking, I forgot the slide number that kind of had the critiques that we could do, but it was in relation to trying to, I think one slide forward. Yes. When we're talking about expanding equitable access to safety services, is this more in relation to published materials, or is this in relation to actually trying to obtain safety services, i.e., when people call 911, are people that don't speak English having trouble getting services when they call 911?
This was related to like the alert system primarily. So when there's a tornado, a winter storm, a hurricane coming, how are we able to inform our non-English speaking community about those dangers and helping them prepare for that? Everything that I've heard about our 911 services, they're prepared to use language access or language services, interpretation and translations.
Thank you. And as it relates to code enforcement, I think that's the next slide. I was happy to see the application of cultural competency training on code enforcers. But how are we going to, I guess, on the council level, interact with this cultural competency training and potential changes in the way code enforcers are enforcing code? I would imagine if there are changes that need to be made, we would want to reflect that in the actual code to provide a level of objectivity so that competency isn't lost, as workers come and go, as councils come and go, and as this priority kind of remains. So I guess the question is, how do we interact with these changes to make sure that they're reflected in the code and aren't just kind of an ad hoc, subjective practice of the time?
Well, I'll say briefly, Councilmember Winston, I've developed a great relationship with Jane Talon. Shout out to her. I know she watches these meetings fairly regularly, and have worked very closely on how we can continue to be a resource to her division. Thankfully, we're in the same department. And so kudos to Rebecca Hefner for the work she's done to bring us all together in consistently evaluating our systems and ensuring that they are accessible to all residents and take into account the diverse needs of the resident populations we serve. And so it's a continued dialogue. I think as we get deeper in that work, there will be things that we uncover that need to be either changed or restructured so as to be easily accessible for particular resident populations. And we will definitely keep council abreast of those things as they are addressed.
The other thing that I would add, Mr. Winston, is that the training will be embedded as part of code enforcement's already existing training, where they're both onboarding new code enforcement officers and also the ongoing professional development that is provided for inspectors. And so we want to make sure that there's some flexibility, that as we engage with new residents and new populations that are arriving in Charlotte, that we're able to adjust that training as necessary, and have it be an embedded component of the training for code enforcement inspectors.
Yeah, maybe we can talk offline about this, because I think this is, like I said, it's very important. But I feel like it could create certain types of gray areas, right? What I don't want to do is create standards, double standards, or anything like that end up creating a bigger problem than we try to solve. For instance, I can just imagine certain populations, certain cultures, for instance, they grow certain types of gardens or keep certain types of animals, on their property. And that's something that I think is important and should be respected. But I could also see how people could, I don't know, if there's a level of subjectivity, it could be applied differently in different parts of town. And that's just what I don't want to create. So maybe this is something we can talk about offline.
Absolutely.
Yes, and too, Mr. Winston brings up a good point about how do we maintain objectivity throughout this process. So I have received several emails from immigrant community on court enforcement issues. So I will forward you a couple of emails as an example, but I think we need to take a deeper dive into some of this, and we have to ensure that we are being equitable in everything that we do, including court enforcement. I know Ms. Johnson has a question. Ms. Johnson?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment, great, to the staff, this great job. This sounds, exciting, or this is exciting, and it's great for our city. So thank you. I also want to give a shout out to Jane and her team. The whole time I've been on council, there's not been one time that I've sent an inquiry to her and she and her team weren't responsive and resolved the issue quickly. So just great job. So thank you. I do have one question on the communication. Are we just looking at Spanish speaking, or how do we improve our outcome? Do we need to have more than more than 2 or 3 languages, or is just increasing our communication with Spanish language information, would that be sufficient in improving our score?
Mm-hmm. So as far as improving our score, the focus is languages beyond Spanish, but where and how we meet those languages can differ based off of the population size and need. For the policy, the language access policy, we follow the federal threshold guidelines, which is 1,000 people or more of that language group that identifies speaking English less than very well, or 5%, whichever is smaller. So here in Charlotte, that's that 1,000 number. And we have about 8 languages in the city of Charlotte that meet that requirement. Spanish being, by leaps and bounds, the largest population. So when we think about this from a context of there's a new program through economic development that's available to residents, we may conduct those meetings in Spanish and English, but we'll also invite in multilingual manner other residents to receive that information in other ways. So it's sort of like managing the ability. So we'll put the flyers out with access to translation is the general idea around it, or show information about how people can request it in their language. And this also would extend to languages outside of that threshold, is using symbolism and simplified English in a way that shows this is available to you and you can make this request of the city of Charlotte to receive these services in your language.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask, do our services, I'm thinking like the buses. You know, the buses have the route number and the name of the street in English of where, you know, where it's headed. Is there an opportunity to make that kind of information bilingual, or any messaging we have on the side of like our sanitation trucks, or just anywhere on our trains, or just the messaging that we have where we have verbiage? Is there an opportunity to add some multilingual information, and if that would help boost our performance or our rating?
I mean, I think in a question of how we are able to serve our non-English speaking population, meeting the certification requirements is that training for staff step is where we've been asked to improve. But as far as improving overall in language access, as we go forward in this work, we're going to identify so many ways where we can be creative in how we meet the needs of our population. I love the idea of, you know, multilingual messaging on any city-owned vehicle, you know, that just shows welcoming in such a big way. But I think language access and programming is creative. There's the ways where we can meet it easily and simply, and that's, you know, just translating and interpretation. But how do we show up with our multilingual employees? How do we show representation in government? How do we do outreach? Those are all things that are part of language access, and will go really far in showing our community that they're welcome to access these services, and that these services are available to them. And then another really big piece of that is plain language. There are hundreds of languages spoken in the city of Charlotte. It's going to be a huge undertaking for us to show, to plan ahead for all of those in a way where we're pre-translating things. But with plain language, we can improve access in an astronomical way for all residents.
Thank you.
Yes, and Ms. Yaffe, if you can also share with Ms. Johnson, as part of our Charlotte Compass immigration work, we had 7 or 8 languages. I remember having Spanish, Vietnamese, Telugu. I can't remember all of them, but that was part of the language access plan. So if you could provide a follow-up report on that, that would be great. And just on what services, so let's say if someone wants to call the city for to report code enforcement issues, or just a service where water issues or solid waste or transportation, could they call in one of those 7 or 8 languages that City Council had adopted as part of the Compact immigration report to access some of those services in those 7 to 8 languages?
The great news is, although the policy may be new, our city departments are already adept at doing a lot of this work in many areas. So Charmex 311 would continue to be that main point of access. They have for years been providing access to interpretation services, so that when you call, you get the bilingual message in English and Spanish, but the 311 representatives are also trained in how to call an interpreter for other languages. And so that's a means of access that we're going to continue to use. So if somebody has questions about their water bill or any other service, Charmex 311 for any language speaker is still a great point of access for that.
Great. Thanks so much, Ms. Yaffe.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hazel, are we ready to dive into our next topic, which is equity in governance framework? I know that's a topic that you'll probably get the most feedback on from the committee. I know Mr. Winston is very passionate about that, along with Ms. Johnson. So we only have 25 minutes left, so I just want to make sure we use the time effectively here on this last topic.
That sounds great. So I'm just going to keep it with Federico Rios to jump right into where we are based on your feedback from last meeting.
Again, thank you for the opportunity to present on this topic. I will try to go as expeditiously as the slides allow. So we're obviously providing you all with an update and finalized documents, but we ask for continued insight and feedback related to these pieces. Moving on to the next slide. Wanted to ensure that you all recognize the work that you've put in by providing feedback to date. This committee has done so much good in relation to getting us to where we are with an equity framework. And so we wanted to just ensure that you all know that we've heard you. These are the things that rose up in our last conversation, and they very much directed us in the creation of what you are about to see. Move on to the next slide. And I'll give us a little time here because I recognize that this is a bit of a lengthy statement. The framing statement serves as our why. It's really purposeful in that it tells us the reason that we're doing this work in the first place. You'll see that in the first 2 paragraphs, really. And then it tells us how we intend on correcting the why. How do we really intend on doing the work that it will take to address the issues that have arisen based on the historic inequities that we experience here in Charlotte. So I don't want to jump through this slide very quickly. I want you all to take in what's written here. It prioritizes the use of an equity lens, and again, specifically in the decision-making process of council. I would also state that this statement is consistent with the city's proclamation declaring racism as a public health crisis, and also takes into account a report that Mecklenburg County produced, Systemic Racism in Government. Both of those items very deeply informed the creation of this framing statement. I'll move on to our next slide.
Mr. Winston has a question. Mr. Winston?
I think this is great. I wonder. Go ahead. No, never mind. Just keep going. I'll think about it. I don't have it quite.
So committee, do you want Mr. Rios to go through this presentation and ask questions at the end? Because some of your questions might be addressed in his presentation. Is that good? Ms. Johnson, are you good with that? I see Mr. Winston is fine with that. Okay.
All right, so this is the much better looking framework. I know what you saw last time was very rough. And really it details where each of the major stakeholders, the role that each major stakeholder plays in this process, right? So when we talk about council, it's really in the policy piece. When we talk about staff, it's in strategy around service delivery. And when we talk about residents and community members, it's really about keeping us accountable, but then also sharing accountability related to the results. To do this work, resources and investments are crucial and are necessary at every single component and stage. And really what you see there at the bottom are the 6 items that were listed in the framing statement. These are foundational. These are our goals. These are what we want to see in relation to the communities that we serve. Give you a second to digest that, then move on to the next slide. Councilmember Winston, I especially want to give you thanks for asking us to include council responsibilities on this. Again, you saw a rudimentary version of this at our last presentation. And so really the application of the equity lens goes through a process where we review the responsibilities that council has. In so doing, you're also looking at the initiatives, and I would say to you that each one of the initiatives listed have been very intentional around prioritizing equity. And so this has already occurred in the processes, in a less formal way, in the processes that you all have undertaken. And then the core approaches are really what staff dives in on to help create the initiatives that change with every council. Our hope, our desire, our trust is that we will get to equitable, thriving individuals and communities through this process. By applying an equity lens in a formal way, we will, and staff undertaking the core approaches that are listed here, we will end up with a more equitable community that benefits all. Again, council's priorities and initiatives change year over year, but the responsibilities remain the same. Moving on to the next slide. And this is the actual equity tool. I think one of the things that is most interesting is I don't think people come to this work believing that a tool is a set of questions, but again, it's a tool, right? So the tool is getting us to a place. It's helping us more deeply understand the work that we're undertaking in a way where we can, again, prioritize the individuals that have been disproportionately affected by inequities in our community. And so these questions: what does this policy seek to accomplish? Have people most impacted by the policy been engaged, and how? Who benefits or could be burdened by this policy proposal? What benefits or adverse impacts could result from this proposed policy? How is addressing racial or other inequities considered in this policy, and will it reduce disparities? Are what you all as council would undertake to review everything that comes before you. Transparently, it would also be what we would expect departments to review prior to presenting you with information. And so this is a iterative process, but it is one where departments know that this is the set of questions that you all will be asking as you review proposals, and it is something that they need to ensure they are prioritizing in the process of creating a proposal. Transparently, not all things are done with racial or other inequities in mind. Some things are done because they need to be done at a given moment in a given community for a myriad of reasons. But ensuring that these questions are asked allows us to continue to prioritize racial or other inequities that need to be considered in our processes.
Mr. Reeves, could you go back to the slide?
Sure. And so this equity lens is applied in municipal governments around the country. This was first enacted in the Northwest, in Seattle and in Portland, and really through GARE, the Government Alliance of Racial Equity, and the National League of Cities. We've really seen this take off as a tool that is utilized both with staff and with councils throughout the country. Our last component is our engagement strategy, and this again is preliminary in nature, but we wanted to lay this out for you all and seek additional input. We would like to do what we have just done with you all, present the acknowledgement, the tool, and the framework. First, to the boards and commissions that are most closely aligned with equity, recognizing that they have a vestige of knowledge around city government and are deeply committed volunteers that we already work with. And so these are the initial committees we'd like to present this framework to. Not exclusive, obviously, to these committees, but definitely where we would like to start. In addition, we'd like to reach out to community-based organizations. Willie Ratchford with our Community Relations Department has done a great job of putting together a list of organizations, but we are open to hearing from you all in relation to other organizations that you feel we should prioritize in sharing this information. Our next step would be to continue a partnership that we have begun to develop with Duke Sanford Policy Lab and look into these particular questions. Again, how can policy debates include an equity lens, because there may be more that we need to inform our continued process? And what is the best public policy definition of equity? This is something that changes from municipality to municipality. But given the guardrails we've given to Duke and this framework, we feel that we will get a robust answer to this that will continue to inform our process. After we're done with, again, these initial steps, we'd like to report back on suggested incorporations into the framework. And I wanted to ensure that we stated that we would not undertake this until you all decided to take this, this full framework to council. Next slide. So we'd love to have additional feedback from this committee. And again, our hopes for next steps would be to share this with full council, have them to potentially, we'd love it if they were to agree, and then we'd move forward with our engagement strategy and incorporating whatever feedback or input we receive from those bodies that have already been mentioned. We would share a final draft with full council. I'd love to leave it to you all now for additional feedback, insight, questions, or concerns.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rios. Certainly, you have incorporated all the feedback that Councilmember Winston, Councilmember Johnson, and I had. So certainly there is more meat here. I really like what I'm seeing here, but I would like to open this up to committee members to see if they have any questions. Mr. Winston, followed by Ms. Johnson.
No, thank you. No, this is great, and I am glad I waited because my initial question or comment was answered. I agree. Those six, I think it was 6 questions, are the tool, and I think that's the right tool. I think when you kind of go through those questions, if you could bring those up, that'd be great. I think it provides, I don't know if I'm going to use the word right, but a sort of rubric that we can kind of put decisions through and to make an analysis of the impacts. It does so without kind of, as you said, Mr. Rios, there are things that we just have to do. It doesn't necessarily put a finger on whether or not council members should vote a certain way, but it provides an equity lens to look through and to consider as we make those decisions. And it feels like most of those 6 questions are questions that council members end up asking. So if we can find processes to kind of streamline the conversations that we have that get filtered through that lens from the very beginning, I think that could really just help in the efficiency of many of our processes. So I like the way this is going, and I would suggest that we do move this on to full council. It does seem pretty ready. One comment of a group I think we should add to the engagement strategy is the Central Piedmont Labor Council. I know we have a lot of interaction with corporate leaders and different community members in general, but the Labor Council has touch points for tens of thousands of workers and of many different backgrounds, and I think their voice is important. And they can be powerful in terms of being a cross-cutting kind of touch point amongst many different members of our community. So please add them to that list.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Mr. Rios, I know that committee and full council will have feedback on community-based organizations, and I will send you those separately because I'm sure there are many organizations that I can think of that we should include in this process.
Yeah, that would be great. Any community-based organizations that you all feel should be readily involved in this process, please, by all means, send us that information. We'd love to involve them. The more feedback we get, I think the better.
Absolutely. Ms. Johnson?
Yes, thank you. Can you go back to the slide that talks about the reducing unintentional or unintended consequences? Thank you. Oh,
There you go.
it was, yeah. So the framing statement, I think this is so powerful, and I just want to thank you. You know, at council, some of the things you hear is we should stay at a 30,000-foot level, and, you know, these unintended consequences, and these are the terms I think that, that I'm happy to be a part of, really taking a look at and really trying to reduce. There's a time that council has responsibilities to ask questions. And I think the 30,000-foot level is, on all issues, and just the kind of the hands-off approach is kind of made perhaps what's led the city to some of the decisions where there's so many people that feel left behind in the city. I mean, Charlotte really is a tale of two cities, and we all know that. So I hope that asking these questions will reduce that and bridge the gap. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to supporting today and at the council meeting. I would just expect to be able to discuss the next steps. And I'm asking also, are we considering, once this is approved, are we going to go back and take a look at all of our policies? Are we going to work with internal audit on certain policies, or how will this be implemented? Or are you prepared to discuss that today? I can think of a policy I'd like to take a look at, and that's the procurement policies. So I just want to know how the plan is to look at the policies and go back, or are we just thinking that these are policies that are developed going forward, or and I would anticipate that other council members might have that question as well. So if you can't answer that today, I would be prepared to answer that during the council presentation. What is the next step? What's the implementation process? And how will we actually go back and take a look, or look at the policies and place them under this lens?
Councilmember Johnson, it's an incredibly insightful question. I would say that after we've presented this to council, we can come up with short, medium, and long-term goals. I do think there is a place within council's purview to review policies that you all feel this lens could be applicable towards, that you would want to have this lens applicable towards. Internally, we're working to review policies that exist. And again, we have the equity and budgeting process, which we would be undertaking next year, which we have done already, which is again acculturating our departments to become more equipped to answer these questions and frame the work that they do in this light. And so it's an iterative process. It's something that will grow over time. But the great question, and I think within the policy standpoint, it's something that council, again, once you all have reviewed and agreed to utilize this framework, I think it's at your disposal to do so with current policies or past policies. But if you give us time, we'll come up with a short, medium, and long-term goal related to this, and better equip you with anything else you may need going forward.
Thank you. And again, this is powerful and this is impactful, and thank you for the work. This feels like a true accomplishment for this committee. So thank you, Mr. Rios, and and the rest of the team. Thank you.
Thank you.
So committee members, are we ready to take an action to move this forward today to the full council? Anyone want to make a motion?
To move to full council.
Second.
Okay, and I support that too. So Mr. Rios and Ms. Hazel, do you need anything else from the committee?
No, thank you very much for all of your feedback.
All right, well, thank you all so much. And I'll see you all later today for the zoning meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.